To all of the people who work the late shift at convenience stores, such as Wawa, 7/11, Quickie Mart, what is the craziest story that you have from your time working there past midnight? Had a drunk guy come in fully clothed, walked around for a minute, stood in place for minutes, then head to the bathroom. When he came out he was wearing nothing but his t-shirt, left the store hanging dong into 3-degree weather. Never saw him again. Fugue state. Not me, but a friend of mine found out during a robbery that the emergency button under the counter actually just locks you in the store with a now panicking armed robber. His boss later told him it was to prevent people from getting away. I mean, it did also put in a call to the alarm company, who eventually called the police, but for a good 25 minutes he really thought he was going to die there. Sounds like massive liability for the store. Most places tell their employees to cooperate. Cash can be replaced, lives can't. Oh man, I have a great one. So I worked at this gas station that constantly got robbed. One night it was me and this woman. We're dealing with a couple of customers when these two guys walk in, grab 4 suitcases of beer, and walk out the door. They were so slick about it we almost didn't notice. They peeled out from the parking lot in an old white Ford F-150. So we called the cops, gave them our statements, went on with our lives. Maybe 2 hours later we see an old white F-150 tearing down the street followed by fricking 9 cop cars. We're like holy crap. Maybe 15 minutes later we see that old white F-150 tearing down the street going the other way, followed by about 14 cop cars. Not an exaggeration. I counted. So the rest of our shift goes by, about 5 hours, and we've forgotten about it. A cop stops in shortly before I punch out and is like, yeah, they were in a stolen truck. We got the guys. So I clock out, get in my car, go to leave, and have to pause while this tow truck trundles on by. I pull in behind it. What's it towing? That same freaking old white Ford F-150. This sounds like the plot to an episode of Clark's Animated. Worked overnight at a quick trip for 2 years. So many drunks. People who'd crap vom all over the bathroom. Had one guy puke from the middle of the candy all the way to the front door. Had another guy fall down and break the roller grill. Had a guy threaten to kill and then frick me because his food stamp card declined. Didn't happen on my shift, but this one regular who would come in and tell everyone that she was my aunt and flip out over trivial crap. Threw a temper tantrum one night, and it took 4 cops to take her down. The one worker who'd get plastered on her nights off at the bar next door and draw dongs on her co-workers' cars. Okay, that was me. Oh, Wisconsin. I once saw a man come in, stare at me for a few minutes, walk into the soda aisle, and slowly pour a 2-liter bottle of Sprite down his pants. Then he left. There was the time a woman drove her car into the 7-11 I worked overnights at. All started when a guy no-showed again. I get called in so a guy doesn't have to work 24 straight hours. Goes well. I'm tired, counting cash 4 AM, and all of a sudden I hear a loud noise behind me. Then the rack of cigarettes behind me rains down on me like a waterfall. Once the cigarettes stopped, I used colorful language to ask what was happening. To myself, but out loud, and go check outside. There's a Jeep pulled back into the spot. I check if the driver is okay, and she is. But I hear through her phone that didn't seem to be on speakerphone. How the frick did you crash into a 7-11? So I call the cops and the owner. It all gets worked out, but when the cops arrived they first laughed, then breathalyzed and alphabet tested the woman to see if she was drunk. She was not, just a tired crappy driver. I'm betting crappy based on the phone call I overheard. The owner trusted me from then on, as I ended up handling the initial insurance portion and regional manager pictures of the damage. The customers were impressed that I didn't crap myself when it happened, and I got this story now. While working an overnight shift at McDonald's, I once watched a guy go through the drive-thru in reverse because his window was stuck and he refused to open his door. Please tell me it was a 2-door, so there is no excuse for him to not use the passenger window behind him. Had a regular customer nicknamed Spuddy who was a shell-shocked arm vet. He came in once and gave me $600 and just said hold on to it for me, I might need it one day. I found out later they kept an envelope in the safe for him to make deposits into cause his daughter would steal his disability checks. One day Spuddy came in with a dirty mangy looking spits and he gets put mop bucket and a big jug of mop and glow and goes outside. He ties the dog up to the spigot near the entrance of the store and fills up the bucket and gets some good suds going, then dumps it on the dog. The dog proceeds to attack him and bites him up pretty bad and Spuddy just bails and runs off. Meanwhile the dog is tied up in front and mad as heck and nobody could get in or out. Had to finally call animal control. They get there, accidentally unleash him and the dog attacked one of the dog catchers and then ran off, presumably to find Spuddy. Legend has it that the dog is still chasing Spuddy. Not super crazy, but a few years ago I worked third shift at Walgreens. I was working and noticed a car in the parking lot with its lights on. Didn't think much of it. An hour or two later they were still there, so I told my manager. We went out to investigate, not supposed to do this, and noticed the car had a lot of damage on the driver's side of the car and the driver was passed out on the steering wheel. We knocked on the window and they woke up and were clearly wasted and we noticed there was a kid in a child seat in the back. Long story short, we called the police and they gave them a sobriety test and arrested them. Saw their mugshot on the local newspaper website a few days later. Felt bad for the kid. When your dad takes you on a trip to get some cigarettes and forget that you're in the car, I worked briefly at a gas station convenience store. The owner of the gas station, my boss, when he tends the store, he just sits in the back room doing whatever, while he has his German Shepherd chill near the cash register. He somehow trained him to bark 3 times whenever a customer comes up to the cash register to pay. My boss will then hear the 3 barks and walk out of his back room to tend to the customer. The dog only does it for my boss though, but not for me or any other of his workers. The dog also urinates by standing on the toilet seat into the toilet bowl. Customer, nice. Probably way too late to get in on this, but UHH. Used to work on Bourbon Street. Got loads of stories. 1. Found a gun in the urinal while a guy was fighting with one of our shot girls. Take a moment, hide gun carefully, and ask boss about it. He points to the guy. Guy's got an empty holster. 2. Had a guy pick up a girl from the restroom because I am leaving right now, except she was still using the bathroom. You never wanna be the guy with a mop on Bourbon. 3. Watch this guy argue with a cop about football or something. He started getting mad. Then he hit the freaking cop in the jaw. One of the bouncers from down the street walked up and grabbed the guy while like a billion cops came from God knows where. 4. Freaking prostitute walked up to me with some powder and asked me if I could tell whether or not it was coke. It was crushed Smarties. At a Missouri-based convenience store. Had a guy in our parking lot, doing what looked to be take-high at 1 in the morning. He would do the motions, then kick flip off the side of the building and go back to doing the motions. We told him he needed to stop doing that. Goes to the pumps, takes the nozzle off, buzzes for inside pay, chooses a grade of fuel and splashes it in his mouth. He spits it out, chooses another grade and does it again. This is the point where we called the cops. After he decided he was done mouthwashing with fuel, he comes in and just starts loading up with bags of chips, candy bars, a single 12 ounces Bud Light from a 6-pack. Half of the stuff was opened. Cop got there, told the guy he had to pay, then put him in the back of his car. Word from the cop the next day was that he was an extremely disturbed individual and he was admitted to a mental ward. Creepy as crap. That was by far the weirdest. I've had a 45-year-old drunk lady dry hump me, people taking juices in the bathroom and playing finger paint all over the walls. I had an idiot, one time, that stuffed a 6-pack down his pants, walked down the aisle, dropped it on accident and had 5 cans drop and just roll away and he walks out the door. By far the most disgusting one was someone placed the 2 plunger in the bathroom on adjacent walls and balanced a piece of crap on them. I just couldn't put my head around that one. I didn't personally experience this one, but down the road at a competing convenience store, they had a guy one night come in, sit down at one of their tables and fillet himself from ear to ear. Even hearing the story still bothers me. Someone placed the 2 plungers in the bathroom on adjacent walls and balanced a piece of crap on them. Holy crap, that's hilarious. While my crew and I were on break sitting on the loading dock at our grocery store, we witnessed a very drunk man coming from the recently closed bar try to steal a Christmas tree from our parking lot. We let him get about 20 feet with it, which took him a good 10 minutes, before yelling at him and scaring him shitless. I had a guy come into the gas station where I work about a year ago, obviously on drugs, but I have a lot of regulars that are addicts, and most aren't violent, just weird. So he wanders around the aisles, occasionally looking over and staring at me for 10 seconds or so each time. After the last customer leaves, he comes up and pulls out a small pocket knife, the Swiss Army knife kind. Looks at me and say, "I was supposed to do something very bad to you, but I decided not to." I think, all while opening and closing this knife. Robbing me is one thing, but this guy just directly threatened my life. He gives me the knife, just hands it to me, tells me to hold on to this for me, looks around for about 15 seconds, and asks for it back. Obviously I shouldn't give it back to him. This dude just threatened to murder me, but this guy is huge, about 6 feet 3 inches 200 pounds lean muscle. He could have killed me with his bare hands, so I just gave it back to him. He tells me to keep my eyes open and leaves. I called the cops after he left. Turns out he's an Iraq war vet who wasn't taking his medicine. It's such a shame. I started open carrying my handgun after that though, since the owner was a pro-gun conservative. Really cleared out a lot of the troublemakers, so I haven't had anything that crazy since. I did have a homeless guy try to pay for junk food with jewelry before asking about any houses for sale in the area. This guy wasn't interested in buying a house, if you catch my drift. Oh, and yesterday I found some used needles in the trash, so that was fun. Another time I had this lady comment on my gun, talking about how she wanted one. This was right after trying to sell me a scale that has what I can only imagine is drug residue on it, with other customers in the store. Bold freaking move. She runs to the bathroom for 20 minutes, during which a local police officer comes in to buy some cookies. Perfect timing. My co-worker tells him what's up, so he calls for backup and they search her and find some H and stuff. Turns out she was shooting up in my bathroom and left some blood on my floor, which upset me the most because I had to clean that crap up. Seen lots of small weird stuff, but those are the ones I remember the most. Whataburger ex-worker here. Night shifts vary. Saturday of the end of spring break, a house party was broken up. All the kids came to Whataburger all of a sudden. Saw the Snapchat videos of the cops breaking it up. Kids thought the corner table was a good rolling table for joints. At the end of the shift saw the same cops that were in the videos. I told them the party they broke up just rolled through here. They laughed. The 4th of July, I did a 10 PM shift to 5 PM. Stoners. Drunk people. It was busy. I love the chaos of drunk people. Guy walked behind the counter. New Year's Eve. Jam-packed. Our manager gave us beads to wear for morale boost. Some drunk lady thought we earned them like they do at Mardi Gras. I said no. I lied to her saying we danced for them. So of course, she wants the shiny beads. I told her I did little teapot dance for them. She drunkenly did the dance in the lobby. I said it wasn't good enough, so she huffed and sat down. My manager thought it was funny. All in all pretty sane for Whataburger. I ruled the diner and kept it in check. That actually sounds entertaining, although I hope that's a typo and you didn't actually do a 19-hour shift because holy frick. This happened in 1996 at a store in Live Oak, FL called Suwannee Swifty. We were located on Walker Ave, which at the time was referred to as Crack Alley. On Friday and Sat nights we'd have a huge number of cars in the parking lot and lots of shoplifting. People getting high and drunk in the lot. I'd already had to call 911 on a heart attack in the bathroom and 2 others in the parking lot at different times. Anyway, I was working the store alone and was at the tail end of a double shift that was turning into a triple. I'd been there since 5 AM and it was coming up on 1 AM, and my relief, which happened that night to be my manager, called in drunk and said I'd have to stay till 5 when the next morning shift come in. I was mad as heck and I could see folks just openly stealing crap and basically daring me to do anything. One of the workers came in from a different location and told me to just shut down for the night. I tried asking people to leave but they wouldn't. I had maybe 40 people in the store by then. Finally I called the police and then got up on the counter and made the announcement that cops were on their way. Everyone had about 3 minutes to take whatever they wanted and get the frick out. It took about 3 minutes to clear us out of every case of beer and every 40 of malt liquor, not to mention most of the bread and beef jerky and even the big jar of pickled eggs and pig's feet we kept on the counter. When the last person left, I put a chain and padlock on the door and went home. The next day I came by at lunchtime and police and insurance people were there along with a still drunk manager who showed up hours late for the morning shift and had no idea what was going on. I asked if I was on the schedule for the week and she just slowly shook her head and told me to get out. Not a convenience store story, but for a while I was a manager at a seedy dive bar in a dodgy strip. We were open from 9 AM to 5 AM and would get all sorts in. One morning a woman orders 3 drinks and 3 meals. She looked a bit out of it, but we would get a lot of people coming off night shift, so didn't think much of it. She proceeds to sit at one of 4 outdoor tables, downs 3 glasses of cheap wine, and when her meal comes she starts feeding the nearby pigeons, tearing the food, schnitzels, with her hands and dropping it. She then escalated to chewing her food and spitting it at the ground, quickly attracted loads of birds, so I politely request that she stop feeding the birds. She acts really affronted, like I was a weirdo, but says she'll stop feeding them. When I turn to walk back inside, she screams, "I'll freaking drag you to the car park and stab you in the throat with a screwdriver." See, lucky the cop shop is opposite the bar and they didn't take long to respond, but it took 4 cops to subdue her. I work a 24-hour BP garage. We had an old creepy Russian bloke, no English and cheap tracksuit etc. walking about 1 AM. He bought something and I thought he was stroking himself through his trousers while I served him. After he left we noticed a puddles on the floor. Turns out he had pee himself while standing at the till. Not a fun one to clean up after. Not a 24-hour story, but I worked at a grocery store for a while. In the middle of the day, a guy parks his brand new BMW in the handicapped lane. A lady rolls up right across a divider from him, and instead of braking her car, slams the gas and rolls right up onto the hood of his car. Both drivers weren't hurt, as the BMW driver was gone, but the car was 6 days old. In other news, he had no handicapped parking yet parked in the handicapped spot. Well, trying to avoid their car getting dinged by parking in the handicapped space, which is what I assume they were doing, sure backfired. I used to work the graveyard shift as a waiter at IHOP. One night as I was checking out a group of people, a man covered in sweat hurries through the front door and stammers out, "Where's the bathroom?" I point to the back and continued taking orders. About 10 minutes later I see him in a corner booth shaking back and forth and muttering under his breath like a madman. I ask a table if they know what his deal is, but they're just as weirded out as I am. I go up to him and ask him if he wants a water or something to drink, but he doesn't address me, so I go back into the kitchen. After I tell my manager, I see 3 cops quickly enter the restaurant and detain him. Turns out the dude was high on M and crashed his car into a bank about a block away, then ran to the IHOP. I worked at Wawa. One night this guy comes and I am assuming he had a mental disorder. Anyways, he walks towards the gas pump and puts the handle where gas comes out in his mouth. He then grabs a lighter and starts flicking it. My manager had to beg him to put the handle thing back on the pump. Waffle House in Albuquerque on the edge of the war zone. 1993. Pre-cell phone. After 9 PM the office was locked and the only other phone took incoming calls only. No outgoing. Just me and another chick. I was 18, she was 19. Worked the night shift. Every few weeks some crackhead would come in and start picking up plates off the tables and start smashing them on the grill. We couldn't call anyone and they were between us and the door, so we'd just have to ride it out, and after they left try and get all the glass out of the grill so we weren't serving bloody mouth hash browns. One place demanded all the money in the register. He was not armed and the place was in a crappy neighborhood, so it had bulletproof dividers. It also had a button that would lock the door. We locked the door on him to prevent him from leaving and called the police. He spent the next 5 minutes tearing up the place. The place was tiny, maybe 80 square feet of merch. Got a free paid day off out of it. I've shared this before on Reddit, but a few years ago when I was working cash at McDonald's overnight, a carload of highly intoxicated dudes rolled up to drive-thru. If you worked fast food, you know immediately if the customers are drunk when they get to the mic, because they literally never stop laughing, yelling, cussing as they order. But these young gentlemen were different. They had a special request for each item they ordered. and that was to add lettuce to each and everything they wanted. I made a milkshake blended with lettuce, topped with whipped cream and lettuce, black coffee with lettuce, McNuggets. I made the McNugget salad, French fries, lettuce. It was actually pretty fun to make everything. Overnight shifts can get pretty slow. When the guys came to the window, the guy driving the car could not hand me the money to save his life. His entire complexion was flushed. His eyes were red and dull and his hand trembled and swayed as he tried to pay. Needless to say, don't drive under the influence. But high drunk customers are usually entertaining. You would think that people would try to be more discreet about the fact they're driving intoxicated, but I literally had a guy one time smoking from his bong while he waited for his food in drive-thru. I worked suicide shift at a gas station for a short while as I was moving soon and wanted to make extra money to help me move out of a town that drove me up the wall with lawlessness and corruption. I wasn't robbed, probably out of the sheer virtue I only had the job for 2 weeks. I did spend those 2 weeks being shot at by punks with paintball guns. Every dang time I stepped outside I got frickin' nailed. Like guys literally had nothing better to do than to hide behind bushes for hours on end and wait for an opportunity to snipe my butt. Anyway, the police in that town would never show up for a complaint about vandals with paintball guns. It just simply wasn't a crime as far as they were concerned. So my mind was made up, I'm never opening the front door again for any reason, no matter what. And they tried everything they could to con me to come outside. Oh, there's a fire, there's someone out here having a heart attack. You better get out here quick, frick off already. In her, this frickin' drunk comes up and asks for the bathroom key. And he says he's too drunk to open the door himself. He needs me to open the door for him. I slid a key through the slot and told him he was on his own. He was fricking with that lock for nearly an hour. Just how frickin' drunk are you, you piece of crap? So he gives up, brings the key back, drops it on the ground, then whips out his dong and pisses on it. I was livid. I went out there to beat the crap of that drunken bastard. Guess what happened the second I opened the front door? The whole goddamn station came under a barrage of hundreds of paintball rounds. There had to be a dozen of those shitheads hiding in the bushes across the street. It took an entire day to wash that crap off the windows. I got hit a few times, but that drunk got the worst of it. He took at least 3 rounds to the face. That was the last time I ever opened that door for charitable reasons. We also sealed off the bathroom to non-customers, but those punks still found a way to get to me. They come in, I don't know, it's them BTW, buy gas, and ask to use the bathroom. So I slid out the key to them. When the box was slid out, 2 of them grabbed the box and yanked it out as hard as they could, making it impossible for me to close it. 3 more jump out of the car. One of them yanks his trousers off and the other 2 pick him up and dropped him with his butt on top of the open box, and he sprayed diuretic crap all over the inside of that box. So with the box out of commission, guess what happens every single time someone has to pay by cash? I open the front door and everyone gets frickin' nailed with paintball gun rounds. Jesus, I'm so glad I got out of that frickin' town. Abbotsford, British Columbia, in case anyone is wondering. 3 years ago I worked graveyard shift MF at 7-Eleven. I had a strange gentleman come in a minivan. He had a group of people in the van with him. It was about 300 hours, and he looked like a Green Day reject. Green spiky hair, obese, greasy, denim vest, and had his eyebrows shaved off with the words, "End the world" tattooed across where his eyebrows once resided. ETW purchased $40 in gas and handed me a $100 bill. It passed the counterfeit pen swipe test, and at the time that was the only way to detect counterfeit bills. But as I looked at the bill, I just felt really uneasy about it, but I accepted it. As he filled up his gas, I stepped outside to smoke, and I memorized the color, make, model of the van along with the license plate and scrolled it down as I returned inside and called the local police after he drove off. The officer arrived and spent 45 minutes checking out this bill. He determined in his 17 years of policing it was the best counterfeit he had seen, and the paper dissolved when it came in contact with moisture. The officer confiscated the bill and I gave him the information of the vehicle and a description of the man. The next day, my supervisor called me and stated I am on suspension until further notice, due to my actions of giving the officer the bill. I had no formal training on what to do if I received a counterfeit that passes the pen test, It was a fairly new 7-Eleven. She caved 2 days later asking me to come in. Jokes on her. I already had plans to give my 2 weeks due to moving to Cleveland. Oh. My parents had a corner shop and somebody carried a broken sofa chair from somewhere, plonked it by the front door and fell asleep in it, blocking the entry. I was working and this was a huge bloke and very smelly. I called my mum and dad who were upstairs, and while dad was all for yelling at him, my mum woke him up with a sandwich and a cup of tea. He ended up trolling off into the night with an old coat and pair of New Balance of my dad's and 2 carrier bags full of groceries. Never saw him again, and we never found out where the chair came from. My dad worked gas station graveyard shifts in college, was held up once, just handed him the $50 or so in the drawer and reported it to the police and his manager. Another time, he reviewed a call from someone claiming to be in a building across the street with a rifle aimed at his head through the window. The guy said he was going to shoot my dad if he didn't empty the drawer into a bag and throw it over the back fence. Unfortunately for the would-be robber, several other people had called in with similar threats that all turned out to be unfounded. So my dad just told him no, called the police and went back to stocking the drink coolers. I worked the overnight shift at a gas station convenience store for years and have a few stories. We were on a major road outside of town, and on weekends we used to get the crowd from the nightclubs. You can always tell when they've had a good night, but on this occasion there was about 5 young women come in, all probably around 18-22 and very drunk. But one in particular is pretty much plastered. She needed help and was essentially being propped up by her friends. She was beyond wasted. They immediately had 4 snacks and soda, and I watch them leave the really drunk girl, who immediately kind of flops to the floor. They finally come up to the counter with a bunch of items. I scan them through and ask them about their night. Suddenly there is this really loud noise, like a bandsaw and a sawmill, only louder. I look at the ladies. They look at me, we look at each other, and then we all turn to see the girl has suddenly started snoring and drooling on the tiled floor. I don't know what it was, but it was the funniest thing ever and we all burst out laughing. Then again, one time I had my boss come in, which never happens, as I work alone. About 3 AM a guy comes in and he's bleeding profusely. The boss starts applying first aid and I call the police. I put a barrier up because the floor is covered in blood. He's lost probably 1 L of it. He's passed out. The ambulance is coming. And then some guy comes in and shouts and he's brandishing a knife. And a customer who happened to be in the store at the time tries to run but slips on the blood and hits her head on the ground. The guy panics and runs. And then the ambulance arrived. So glad my boss was there to witness that. I could scarcely believe it myself. Not necessarily cringe-worthy, but I'll share it anyways. Working late at Burger King. Only drive-thru was open. It was a slow night, so we are just hanging out. Car pulls into the parking lot and goes to the back by the dumpster. A few minutes later a patrol car pulls in next to the first car. A woman gets out of the car and goes into the patrol car. About 20 minutes later the woman and a cop get out of the patrol car, make out, and then she drives off. Cop gets back into his car and drives off too. The whole time we were speculating. Cop called the wife for a quickie during his shift. Cheaters? We'll never know, but small stuff like that made time pass by. That and the occasional nip slip by customers in the drive-thru. It was about 10 PM, so not super late, but I worked at a gas station. We had one customer we came in frequently around that time. He only mumbled gibberish and made these high-pitched keening noises for yes and no. He wouldn't make eye contact and it made him visibly nervous when you looked straight at him. He refused to touch his receipt and would mime ripping up a piece of paper, meaning he wanted you to rip up the receipt into tiny pieces and throw it away. He also refused to touch quarters, so when you gave him change you had to use dimes. He would also check the security camera each time he came in. I'm guessing he was schizophrenic or that and a combination of other things. The other employees and even my manager would make fun of him and laugh at him while ringing up his purchases, which is fricked up because he knew he was being laughed at. I was always sure to humor him and be nice to him. It got to where he would pat the counter a few times after I gave him his change. I think kind of as a thank you. You're a nicer person than your coworkers. The man knows he has problems and it's wonderful that you treated him like a human being. I'm sure he was thanking you. Always an upvote for Wawa. Nothing better than a midnight Wawa run. If you have been visited by the wealth rat, subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.